The invitation. Jake Carter had seen many things in his life. He had flown through asteroid fields, escaped bounty hunters, and even survived a black market deal gone wrong on a pirate moon. But nothing prepared him for the sight in front of him. The Celestial Empress floated in space like a golden palace. Its surface shimmered with artificial starlight, glowing in different colors as energy flowed through its massive structure. It was not just a ship. It was the most luxurious pleasure cruiser in the entire galaxy. Only the richest, most powerful beings could step inside. And yet, somehow, Jake Carter had been invited. He stared at the VIP invitation in his hands. The card was made of real platinum, its edges shining under the ship's docking bay lights. There was no name, just a simple message written in elegant gold letters. "Welcome to the Celestial Empress, honored guest. Your experience awaits." Jake frowned. He had never asked for this. He wasn't a rich man, a king, or even an important smuggler anymore. He had spent the last few years drifting, taking whatever small jobs he could find just to keep his ship running. So why would someone like Lady Seraphina, the mysterious owner of this ship, invite him? Something didn't feel right. The docking ramp extended, and a soft, automated voice spoke. "Please proceed, Mr. Carter. Your presence is expected." Jake hesitated for just a second before stepping forward. If someone wanted him dead, they wouldn't need an expensive trap like this. And if this was a mistake, well, maybe he'd get a free drink before they threw him out. A palace among the stars. The moment Jake stepped inside, his breath caught in his throat. The ship's interior was beyond luxury. The floor beneath him was made of real crystal, reflecting light in soft golden hues. Towering holographic waterfalls flowed into nothingness, filling the air with the scent of fresh rain. Exotic dancers, wearing shimmering fabrics, twirled around golden pillars. Servant drones glided across the floor, carrying trays filled with drinks that probably cost more than Jake's entire ship. He had expected luxury. He hadn't expected this. A tall, slender alien with glowing blue eyes approached him. Its movements were unnaturally smooth, like a machine wearing human skin. It gave a small, polite bow. "Welcome, Mr. Carter. Your private suite has been prepared." The Empress herself extends her hospitality. Jake raised an eyebrow. The Empress herself. "Tell me," he said slowly, "why am I here?" The alien smiled in a way that didn't quite reach its eyes. "All our guests are chosen for a reason, Mr. Carter. Enjoy the experience." That answer didn't sit well with him. But before he could press further, the alien gestured towards a floating hover lift, which opened with a soft chime. Jake sighed. He had a bad feeling about this, but curiosity was stronger than fear. He stepped inside. A dangerous crowd. The lift moved silently through the ship, passing multiple floors that looked like different worlds. One deck was a giant casino, where reptilian creatures tossed glowing dice, while robotic dealers smiled. Another deck had a gravity-free dance floor, where alien aristocrats floated midair, drinking glowing blue liquid from crystal glasses. Jake frowned as he noticed something strange. The guests here weren't just wealthy elites. Some of them were dangerous. He spotted a warlord from the outer colonies, a man known for wiping out entire planets for sport. Near the casino, a black market arms dealer sipped wine while laughing with a corrupt senator. And wasn't that the infamous bounty hunter, Cordis the Fang? Jake's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a party. This was a gathering of some of the most ruthless people in the galaxy. What the hell was he doing here? The lift stopped at his floor. The doors slid open to reveal a hallway of pure luxury. Soft golden light lined the walls, and gentle music played from unseen speakers. His suite was at the end of the hall, and as he approached, the door slid open on its own. Inside, he was greeted with something unexpected. The perfect room, or a trap. Jake's suite looked like his childhood home. The old wooden table where he used to eat with his father. The soft, battered couch where he had slept after long days. Even the smell of cooked meat and fresh coffee lingered in the air. His heart pounded. This is impossible. Everything was exactly as he remembered. Every detail was perfect. Too perfect. A small chime echoed in the room. The walls shimmered, revealing hidden screens. A soft, female voice spoke from the ceiling. "Welcome, Mr. Carter. We hope you enjoy your stay." The voice was pleasant, but something about it sent a chill down Jake's spine. He turned to the mirror near the bed and froze. Behind him, through the reflection, he saw something wrong. A woman in a red dress stood near the door, watching him. But when he spun around, she was gone. His pulse raced. The AI's voice returned, this time with a new message. "Attention all VIP guests. The game will begin shortly. Please prepare accordingly. And remember, only one of you will survive the night." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. What game? And why did he suddenly feel like he was the one being hunted? The first night's game. Jake Carter had been in bad situations before. He had survived space pirates, double-crossing smugglers, and once, an entire prison riot on Titan IV. But nothing compared to the eerie silence that filled his luxurious suite aboard the Celestial Empress. He sat on the edge of the too-perfect couch, staring at the mirror where he had seen the woman in red just moments ago. His pulse was still racing. There had been no sound, no shadow, no trace of her presence. Was she real? A hologram? A hallucination? Before he could think any further, the soft chime echoed through the room. "Attention all VIP guests," the ship's AI announced. "Your first night's experience begins now." The golden walls shimmered. The luxurious suite changed before his eyes. The cozy home from his childhood disappeared. The soft light was replaced by darkness. The air turned cold. The familiar wooden floor beneath his feet melted away, replaced by something wet. Jake stood up fast. His boots splashed against shallow water. The walls of the suite had transformed into thick jungle vines, dripping with moisture. The air smelled of rain and something metallic. Blood. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. A new voice answered him. "Welcome, Player 24, a robotic female voice purred. "Your challenge has begun." The jungle of nightmares. Jake's instincts kicked in. This was no longer a pleasure cruise. This was a test. The vines moved slightly as if something alive was crawling through them. The thick mist rolled in, limiting his vision. He took slow steps forward, trying to ignore the deep, eerie silence. A sharp crack of branches snapped to his left. Something was out there, watching. Jake wasn't alone. He crouched low, staying near the ground. Years of experience told him that if someone was hunting him, the best move was to become the hunter first. Then he heard it, a growl. Low, dangerous, close. The mist shifted, revealing eyes, glowing yellow eyes, watching him from the darkness. Then another pair, and another. Jake swore under his breath. Predators, a deadly welcome gift. A soft hum filled the air. Jake turned to see a floating drone hovering above him. It was sleek, metallic, and carried a small black case. The AI spoke again. "Each player is given a survival gift. Choose wisely." Jake reached out and grabbed the case. It was locked with a biometric scan. The moment his hand touched it, the case clicked open. Inside, he found a single energy knife, short range, but deadly. A flare gun, one shot only. A small vial of an unknown liquid, no label, no instructions. Jake cursed under his breath. This wasn't a weapon loadout. It was a joke. The growling got closer. The eyes in the mist multiplied. The first kill. Suddenly, a scream tore through the jungle. Jake spun toward the sound. A figure ran out of the mist. Another VIP guest. A man in an expensive white suit, torn and bloodied, stumbling forward. His eyes were wild with fear. Jake barely had time to react before something massive leaped from the shadows. A beast twice the size of a lion, with razor-sharp mandibles and 6 legs built for speed. The rich man never stood a chance. The creature pounced, its teeth sinking into his shoulder. The man's scream turned into a gurgling choke. Blood sprayed into the air. Jake took a step back, heart hammering. The jungle was a death trap. He had to move. Now. The hunt begins. Using the cover of mist, Jake sprinted in the opposite direction. His feet splashed against wet ground, and vines clawed at his skin. The AI's voice returned, cold and amused. "Congratulations, Player 24. One competitor eliminated. The game continues." Jake gritted his teeth. This wasn't a game. This was a slaughter. The mist shifted again, revealing a metallic tower in the distance, glowing with golden light. A possible exit. He wasn't sure, but it was the only landmark in this twisted jungle. He forced himself to move faster. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Not creatures. Humans. Jake dove behind a fallen tree, gripping his energy knife. He peeked through the mist. 2 figures appeared. One was a hulking reptilian warrior, wearing thick armor with a plasma rifle in hand. The other was a tall woman in a sleek combat suit, moving with the grace of a trained assassin. They weren't running. They were tracking him. Jake exhaled slowly. This just got worse. The unknown ally. As he planned his next move, something cold pressed against his neck. A gun. Jake froze. A soft whisper brushed against his ear. "Stay quiet, Carter, or you're dead." The voice was female. Low, dangerous, familiar. He slowly turned his head and saw her. The woman in red. The same one from his sweet mirror. The one who had disappeared without a trace. Up close, she was deadly beautiful. Dark hair pulled back, piercing green eyes that saw everything. She wore a sleek, high-tech combat suit beneath her red cloak. "Who are you?" Jake whispered. She smirked. "Your only chance at survival." The reptilian warrior and assassin were getting closer. Jake didn't have much time to decide. He could trust the mysterious woman, or take his chances alone. Either way, one thing was clear. The first night's game had begun, and only one of them would survive. The game turns deadly. Jake Carter had been in tight situations before, but this was a whole new level of hell. A deadly jungle simulation, alien predators stalking the shadows, trained killers hunting him like prey. And now, a mysterious woman in red holding a gun to his neck. "Who the hell are you?" Jake whispered, his pulse hammering. The woman smirked, green eyes sharp with amusement. "I just saved your life, Carter." "Maybe start with thank you." Her voice was steady, controlled and dangerously confident. The kind of person who never panicked, no matter how bad things got. But Jake wasn't the trusting type. "Fine," he said, glancing toward the reptilian warrior and the assassin moving through the mist. "But if you're gonna shoot me, at least make it quick. I'd rather die clean than get ripped apart by one of those jungle beasts." The woman sighed, lowering her gun. "If I wanted you dead, Carter, you'd already be bleeding out." Jake turned slightly, still cautious. "Then why are you here?" She tilted her head. "Because you're a wild card. And wild cards, they break the game." Before Jake could question her further, a deep growl echoed through the jungle. The ground vibrated. Something big was coming. The beast in the dark. The assassin and the reptilian warrior had stopped moving. They weren't chasing Jake anymore. They were looking behind him. Jake felt the hairs on his neck rise. Slowly, he turned his head. From the shadows, a massive creature stepped forward. 8 legs. Black, chitinous armor. Red bioluminescent veins pulsing under its skin. Its long, razor-sharp mandibles clicked together in hunger. Jake swallowed hard. Yeah, that's bad. The assassin moved first, drawing twin energy daggers. She vanished into the mist, circling the creature like a panther. The reptilian warrior, however, stood his ground, gripping his plasma rifle tight, his scaled lips pulled back in a sharp-toothed grin. Finally, he growled. A real fight. He opened fire. Chaos unleashed. The jungle exploded in plasma fire. Jake didn't wait around to see who won. He grabbed the woman in red's wrist and pulled her behind a massive tree. "We need to move," he said. "Fast." She didn't argue. The assassin reappeared like a ghost, leaping onto the creature's back, slicing deep with her daggers. The reptilian warrior roared as the beast lashed out, tearing a deep gash into his side. Despite the chaos, the woman in red remained calm. "See that tower?" she whispered, pointing toward the distant golden glow. "That's where we need to go. It's the only safe zone." Jake narrowed his eyes. "And how do you know that?" She gave him a sly look. "Because I've played this game before." The truth about the game. Jake didn't have time to argue. They ran through the jungle, dodging low-hanging vines and deep puddles that smelled of decay. As they moved, he kept glancing at her. Who was she? How did she know about this game? "You said you played this before," he said between breaths. "What did you mean?" She glanced at him. "I meant exactly that. This isn't the first time the Celestial Empress has hosted the game. It happens every few years. A group of VIPs are invited. A few survive. Most don't." Jake clenched his jaw. "That's insane. Why would anyone come here willingly?" "They don't," she said. "Not really. Some think they were invited as a reward. Some were tricked. And others," her voice darkened, "others are put here as punishment." Jake didn't like the way she said that. "Which one am I?" She gave him a knowing smile. "I guess we'll find out." The tower and the first elimination. They'd reached the base of the Golden Tower, the only structure in the jungle simulation that didn't look wild and untamed. A circular door stood in front of them, glowing with a red lock symbol. Jake tried the panel. Locked. "Of course," he muttered. "Let me guess. We need some kind of key." The woman in red pulled something from her pocket, a small silver chip, and pressed it against the panel. The door clicked open. Jake stared at her. "Where the hell did you get that?" She smirked. "I told you. I know how the game works." Before Jake could push further, a loud scream tore through the jungle. He turned just in time to see the reptilian warrior lifted off the ground, impaled through the chest by the monster's mandibles. His plasma rifle fell from his grip, sinking into the mud. The assassin, bloody but still moving, took one last look at Jake before disappearing into the mist again. The AI's voice rang out. "Elimination confirmed. Player 11 is dead. 7 competitors remain." Jake exhaled. "Great. Now we're counting down the body count." The woman in red stepped inside the tower. "That's exactly what they want." Jake followed her in, the door sealing behind them. The moment it did, the jungle outside vanished, flickering away like a hologram. The room they entered was pure white, lined with smooth silver walls. It was quiet. Safe. Or so he thought. A message from the Empress. A hologram flickered to life in front of them. Lady Zera appeared, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, lounging on a floating throne. Her golden eyes were sharp, almost amused. "Congratulations, survivors," she purred. "You made it through the first challenge. I hope you found it entertaining." Jake scowled. "Entertaining. People died." Zera's hologram smiled. "Oh, my dear Mr. Carter. People die every day. The difference here is that their deaths serve a purpose." The woman in red crossed her arms. "And what purpose is that?" Zera's smile widened. "To entertain the galaxy's most powerful players, of course. You didn't think this was just a pleasure cruise, did you?" Jake's blood ran cold. Zera leaned forward, her voice turning darkly amused. "The real game hasn't even begun yet." The hologram flickered out. The walls of the room shifted, revealing 4 different doors leading in separate directions. The AI's voice returned. "Round 2 begins now." Jake clenched his fists. The game was far from over. Escape plan. Jake Carter stood in the center of the white, sterile room, his mind racing. The jungle simulation was gone, replaced by a deadly new reality. One where he wasn't just fighting to survive monsters, but also the twisted entertainment of the galaxy's elite. Lady Zera had made it clear. The Celestial Empress wasn't just a luxury cruiser. It was a death game for the rich and powerful to watch, a stage where VIP guests were forced to fight, kill, and betray each other for survival. And now, round 2 was beginning. The smooth, metallic walls around him shifted, revealing 4 separate doors, each leading in different directions. The AI's voice echoed in the silence. "Survivors, choose your path. Only one will lead to the next phase." Jake exhaled. Great. Another test. Beside him, the woman in red studied the doors, her green eyes unreadable. He still didn't know her name, but she had proven herself useful. More than that, she knew things about the game that no one else did. "Any ideas?" Jake asked, watching as the doors pulsed with dim blue lights. She smirked. "One of these doors leads forward. The others," she tilted her head, "let's just say, they're not as welcoming." Jake clenched his jaw. "So 3 out of 4 doors are traps." That's one way to put it. Before Jake could reply, a loud beeping filled the room. The AI's voice returned, now with an amused tone. "Survivors, you have 60 seconds to choose." A deadly choice. The air in the room grew heavy, the countdown now pulsing on the walls. The sense of urgency was clear. If they didn't choose a door, the room itself might turn against them. Jake scanned each entrance. They all looked identical, but something about the one on the far right seemed different. The lights flickered slightly, almost as if the system was hiding something. Before he could move, a soft hiss sounded from the leftmost door. Jake and the woman in red both turned at the same time. From the opening crack of the door, something slithered. Something big. A mechanical tentacle, black, metallic, and armed with razor-sharp barbs, shot out. Jake barely had time to react before it lashed forward, aiming straight for his chest. Fight or die. Instinct took over. Jake dove sideways, rolling across the floor as the tentacle slammed into the ground, leaving a deep, smoking scar on the metal. The woman in red was already moving. Fast. She pulled out a small, compact pistol and fired 3 quick shots at the tentacle. The bullets sparked off its surface, doing nothing. "Yeah, figured that wouldn't work," she muttered. The tentacle recoiled, as if sensing resistance, and then lashed out again, twice as fast. Jake saw his opening. He grabbed the plasma knife from his belt and, with a single swift motion, slashed across the metal limb as it came down toward him. A horrific screech filled the room as blue liquid spurted from the wound. Sparks flew. The tentacle twitched violently before retracting back into the door it came from. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut. The AI chuckled softly. "Incorrect choice. 3 doors remain." Jake panted, his grip tight on the knife. "Yeah, not going through that one." The woman in red glanced at the rightmost door, the one Jake had been eyeing earlier. "We don't have much time," she said. "If you've got a feeling about that one, we better move." Jake didn't hesitate. He ran forward and pressed the panel. The door slid open. Beyond it was a long metallic corridor, dimly lit. No monsters. No traps. The woman in red gave him a look. Lucky guess. Jake smirked. Skill. Sure. She stepped inside. Jake followed, the door sealing shut behind them, just as the AI's countdown hit 0. The secret beneath the ship. The corridor was too quiet. Unlike the jungle simulation or the shifting game room, this place felt different, darker. It reminded Jake of a maintenance tunnel, but why would a luxury pleasure ship have hidden tunnels? The woman in red led the way, moving with purpose. "You seem to know a lot," Jake said. "How many times have you been in this game?" She didn't look back. "This is my 3rd time." Jake almost stopped walking. Third, she must have noticed his reaction because she finally turned toward him. Surprised. Surprised you're still alive, Jake admitted. No offense, but it doesn't seem like the kind of game you get second chances in. Her expression darkened. You don't. The first time I was here, I escaped. The second time, I wasn't a player. I was hunting one. Jake narrowed his eyes. You were a bounty hunter. She gave a small, knowing smile. Something like that. Before he could push further, a new sound echoed through the corridor. A soft, rhythmic beeping. Jake tensed. What is that? The woman in red didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a small device from her belt, a scanner, and activated it. A blue holographic map appeared. Jake leaned in. The map showed the entire ship, but beneath it, there was another layer, a hidden section. He exhaled sharply. There's a whole level of the ship no one knows about. She nodded. And that's where we need to go. The stasis chambers. They moved fast, following the signal. The tunnel sloped downward, the walls becoming darker, colder. Then suddenly, the hallway opened into a massive underground chamber. Jake froze. Rows upon rows of glass stasis pods stretched out before them. Hundreds of them, each one containing people. Unmoving, sleeping, frozen. His stomach twisted. What the hell is this? The woman in red's face was unreadable. The real reason the Celestial Empress exists. Jake stepped closer to one of the pods. The person inside, a man, mid-30s, dressed in formal clothing, was alive, but unconscious. He checked another, and another. Some of the faces he recognized. They were past VIP guests. They hadn't won the game. They hadn't died either. They had been collected. Jake turned toward the woman in red. Why? She exhaled. Because this isn't just a game. She pointed toward a massive control panel at the far end of the chamber. It was labeled Biometric Cloning System. Active. Jake's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a pleasure cruise. It wasn't just a death game. It was a harvesting facility. And the Celestial Empress was keeping the best survivors for something far worse. Into the abyss. Jake Carter had seen some messed up things in his life. Smugglers selling children into slavery. War criminals erasing entire colonies. Pirates stripping planets bare. But this was worse. He stood frozen in the dim light of the underground chamber, staring at the rows of stasis pods stretching into the darkness. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of people trapped in glass prisons, their bodies perfectly preserved. Some of them he recognized. VIP guests from previous years, business tycoons, corrupt politicians, infamous bounty hunters. All of them had disappeared without a trace. But they weren't dead. They had been collected. Jake turned to the woman in red, his voice low and tense. Tell me I'm wrong about what I'm thinking. She didn't answer right away. Her green eyes flicked to the massive biometric cloning system at the far end of the chamber. The words active blinked in soft red light. You're not wrong, she said. This place isn't just a game. It's a farm. Jake felt his stomach twist. Farm for what? She gestured toward the stasis pods. For them. The real owners of the Celestial Empress. Jake clenched his fists. He was sick of cryptic answers. Who are they? She hesitated for only a second, then whispered, The architects. The architects of the game. Jake frowned. Never heard of them. You wouldn't have, she said. They don't exist in any official records. No one talks about them because no one knows about them. But they control everything. Governments, war zones, the biggest corporations, and this ship. She gestured around them. It's one of their projects. Jake exhaled sharply. His gut told him she wasn't lying. And what do they do with all these people? She walked to one of the pods and wiped away the condensation from the glass. Behind it, a man with gray-streaked hair and a regal face lay in stasis. His face twitched slightly, like he was trapped in some half-dream. "They don't just keep them here," she said. "They copy them, improve them. Then they sell them to the highest bidder." Jake's blood ran cold. Cloning. They weren't just trapping people. They were stealing them, replacing them. He turned to the control panel, trying to process just how deep this went. The screen displayed current cloning cycles. Some were still in progress. Others had already been shipped to various destinations across the galaxy. They don't kill the winners, Jake realized. They just take them. And they make sure no one ever notices the difference, the woman in red confirmed. Because the copies, they think they're real. A countdown to capture. Jake clenched his jaw. "We need to shut this place down." She nodded. "Agreed. But we have a problem." She pointed to a security monitor on the far wall. Jake followed her gaze, and his breath caught in his throat. The camera feed showed the main game arena. 7 players remained, but Lady Seraphina had changed the rules. She had just announced a new hunt. And Jake. His face was flashing across every screen as the target. "Attention VIP players." Zara's voice purred through the speakers. "Jake Carter has decided to cheat. And that simply won't do. The reward for bringing me his head. A one-way ticket off this ship. Let the hunt begin." Jake swore under his breath. "I hate that woman." The woman in red smirked. "She does have a way of making things personal." The security feed showed 2 heavily armed players, one wielding a plasma shotgun, the other an electrified spear, already sprinting through the halls, heading straight for the hidden level. They had 10 minutes. Jake turned to the control panel. "How fast can you override this system?" She pulled a small hacking device from her belt. "If I had proper access codes, 30 seconds. But since I don't, I'll need at least 5 minutes. Jake exhaled sharply. "We don't have 5 minutes." Setting the trap. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. The hunters were close. Jake scanned the chamber, eyes darting between the frozen VIPs and the massive machinery around them. His mind raced. Then he spotted it, the environmental controls. He turned to the woman in red. "Can you override the temperature settings in the stasis pods?" She frowned. "Why?" "Because we're about to wake up an army." Her eyes widened slightly. Then she grinned. "That's a terrible idea." Jake smiled back. "I know." She typed in rapid commands, overriding the automatic safety locks. The stasis pods hissed, the freezing process reversing. The security feed showed the 2 hunters stepping into the outer chamber. "Get ready," Jake said, gripping his plasma knife. "Things are about to get messy." The frozen wake up. The first stasis pod cracked open, and the man inside, a senator from the core worlds, gasped, his eyes flying open in confusion. Then another pod opened, and another. Within seconds, dozens of dazed VIPs stumbled out of their pods, confused and terrified. The doors burst open. The first hunter, a massive brute with cybernetic arms, stepped inside, shotgun raised. "Game over, Carter." Jake ducked just as the hunter fired. The plasma round hit a nearby pod, shattering it, and waking up an extremely angry mercenary leader. The mercenary's eyes snapped open. He took one look at the brute holding the shotgun and tackled him to the ground. Chaos erupted. More hunters stormed in, only to find dozens of confused, furious VIPs waking up at the same time. Fists flew. Weapons were fired. The hunters were quickly overwhelmed. Jake grabbed the woman in red's hand. "Time to go." She didn't argue. She slammed the final command into the system, setting it to self-destruct. The screen flashed. "Biological experiment, termination sequence." Jake felt the floor vibrate beneath him. The stasis pods began overloading, sending sparks flying. The ship was waking up. The final exit. They sprinted toward a hidden maintenance hatch, barely slipping inside before the entire chamber went into lockdown. Jake turned to the woman in red as they climbed up the escape shaft. "You never told me your name," he said. She gave him one last smirk. "Call me Vesper." With that, they burst through the final door, only to find themselves face to face with Lady Seraphina. The elegant woman was waiting in a grand lounge, sipping a glass of red wine, her golden eyes amused. "Well, well," she purred. "I must say, Mr. Carter, you are exceeding my expectations." Jake clenched his fists. Vesper reached for her weapon. Zara simply smiled. "Shall we begin the final round?" The final showdown. Jake Carter and Vesper stood frozen in place, their muscles tensed, as Lady Seraphina took a slow sip from her wine glass. Behind them, the underground cloning facility was collapsing. Sparks rained from flickering lights, and warning sirens blared through the corridors. The stasis pods were failing, spilling out their confused, terrified occupants into the chaos. And yet Seraphina, she was calm. Too calm. "You've made quite the mess, Mr. Carter," she purred, setting her glass down on the table beside her. "I should be furious." And yet, she tilted her head, eyes gleaming with amusement. "I find myself impressed." Jake clenched his fists. "Yeah. Well, I find myself pretty damn sick of you." Zara chuckled. "Oh, Carter, you really think this is about me?" She gestured subtly, and from the shadows, 6 heavily armed guards stepped forward, their rifles aimed directly at Jake and Vesper. Vesper's hand inched toward her belt. "Tell me you have a plan," she muttered under her breath. Jake exhaled. "I'm working on it." Zara leaned back against a golden railing. "I wonder, do you know why you were chosen, Mr. Carter?" Jake stiffened. "I assumed because someone thought I'd be entertaining." She smiled. "You assume too much." The room shifted. Jake's vision flickered. The walls shimmered like a hologram. And suddenly, they weren't in a grand lounge anymore. They were standing in a massive floating arena surrounded by thousands of invisible spectators, a coliseum in the stars. The AI's voice echoed above them. Final round initiated. Begin. A battle for survival. Jake barely had time to react before the guards opened fire. Vesper flipped behind a metal console, her pistols blazing. Jake dived for cover, rolling just as plasma shots sizzled inches from his face. Zara, she simply watched from above, sipping her wine as if she were watching a casual sporting event. Jake gritted his teeth. Figures. One of the guards charged at him, a brute with cybernetic arms, and a shock baton. Jake sidestepped at the last second, using the guard's momentum against him. He grabbed the plasma knife from his belt and plunged it into the brute's exposed side. The guard grunted, then collapsed. But Jake didn't have time to celebrate. More were coming. Vesper, meanwhile, was a blur of movement. She darted between cover, taking down enemies with pinpoint accuracy. Headshots, throat slashes, every move was perfect. "You're enjoying this way too much," Jake shouted. Vesper grinned. "I thrive under pressure." Jake muttered a curse and ducked as another guard fired a high-impact blast. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and worst of all, they were being washed. The air around them shimmered again. That's when Jake saw them. The architects. The gods behind the game. They were not human. They weren't even truly visible. Dark, elongated figures hovered in the space above the arena, their bodies shifting like liquid shadows. No faces, no features, just presence. Jake felt their attention on him, like icy fingers pressing against his mind. "They're studying me." Zara smiled knowingly. "Ah, I see you've noticed them." Jake clenched his jaw. "What are they?" She tilted her head. "The ones who decide who is worthy." Jake didn't like the sound of that. "Survive this, Carter," Zara continued, "and they'll make you an offer you can't refuse." Jake's stomach twisted. "And if I refuse?" She laughed softly. "No one ever refuses, darling." The betrayal. The battle was still raging, But Jake's mind was spinning. This wasn't just about entertainment. This was about something bigger. Then, a blade sliced through the air. Vesper cried out, staggering back, clutching her side. Jake's heart stopped. She had been stabbed. And the attacker? One of the freed VIPs from the stasis pods. A clone. Zera clapped her hands together. Ah, what a beautiful twist. You see, Mr. Carter, the clones aren't just replacements. They're loyal. Jake's hands curled into fists. You absolute monster. Zera smiled. Oh, I'm so much more than that. One last trick. Jake had seconds to decide. He could fight, but they were surrounded. Or he could do something stupid. He glanced at the control panel near the center of the arena. If he could override the system. He grabbed Vesper and pulled her close. Can you walk? She gritted her teeth. I can fight. Good. Jake activated his last flare gun and fired it straight into the air. The sudden flash of light blinded everyone, except Jake and Vesper, who moved fast. They sprinted toward the control panel, dodging gunfire and energy blasts. Jake reached it first, hands flying over the interface. Vesper covered him, pistol blazing despite her wound. Zera's expression finally changed, from amusement to annoyance. Stop them, she ordered. Jake's fingers found what he was looking for, an override command. With a single keystroke, he activated the ship's failsafe protocol. The AI's voice blared. Security breach detected. Emergency system shutdown in progress. The entire arena trembled. And then, the shields collapsed. The fall of the Celestial Empress. A vacuum breach erupted across the ship. The spectators, the architects, vanished instantly, retreating into the unknown. Zera's eyes went wide. You fool, she hissed. You have no idea what you've done. Jake grabbed Vesper and ran. The guards were panicking as the gravity fields failed. Everything was breaking down. Zera, however, simply laughed, as if she still knew something Jake didn't. He didn't have time to figure it out. He dragged Vesper toward an escape pod, sealing the door just as the ship began tearing itself apart. As they launched into space, the Celestial Empress collapsed in on itself, swallowed by its own failing systems. Jake exhaled, watching it burn. But something still felt off. Vesper, pale but alive, spoke first. This isn't over. Jake nodded slowly. She was right. Because the last thing he saw before the ship disappeared was Zera, smiling. The truth beyond the stars. Jake Carter sat in the escape pod, watching the burning wreckage of the Celestial Empress through the reinforced viewport. The once magnificent palace of pleasure, power, and death was now nothing more than drifting debris, its artificial golden glow fading into the darkness of space. He should have felt relief, but he didn't. Because somewhere in that wreckage, or beyond it, was Lady Zera, and she was still smiling. Beside him, Vesper groaned, clutching her wounded side. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, but her eyes were still sharp, still focused. You okay? Jake asked, voice rough. She gave him a weak smirk. I've been worse. Yeah. Remind me never to hear that story. She winced but chuckled. I might live long enough to tell you, if we don't die in this tin can first. Jake glanced at the pod's controls. The navigation system was offline. No hyperdrive, no distress signal, just empty space. They had escaped the Celestial Empress. But they weren't safe. And the galaxy, it was far bigger and far more dangerous than Jake had ever imagined. A message from the dead. A sharp beep echoed inside the pod. Jake frowned and checked the console. A transmission was coming through. Vesper stirred. Is that? Jake hesitated, then pressed the accept button. A holographic display flickered to life in front of them, and just like he feared, Lady Zera appeared. But this wasn't a live transmission. It was a recording. Zara sat on her usual floating throne, draped in a sleek red gown, holding a glass of wine. Untouched, unbothered, unkilled. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter," she purred, golden eyes glinting. "You survived my little game. That alone makes you interesting." Jake gritted his teeth. "I hate her." Vesper sighed. "Join the club." Zara continued, her tone almost amused. "But I wonder, do you really think this is over?" Jake didn't like where this was going. "The Celestial Empress was just one stage," Zara said. "A small arena in a much, much bigger game. And you, my dear Carter, you've just caught the attention of players far beyond your understanding." The display shifted, showing star maps, constellations Jake didn't recognize, filled with marked coordinates, hidden routes, and coded symbols. Then, a single word flashed on the screen. Project AAC in Chion. Jake stared at it. "What the hell is Project Ascension?" Zara smiled. "The beginning of something far greater than you can imagine. And now, you're a part of it." The transmission glitched, Zara's face warping slightly before stabilizing. "But don't worry," she continued, leaning forward. "You won't have to find it. It will find you." The message cut out. The pod fell into silence. For a long moment, neither Jake nor Vesper spoke. Then Vesper exhaled sharply. "We're screwed, aren't we?" Jake ran a hand down his face. "Oh yeah, absolutely." The architect's shadow. Before either of them could process what had just happened, a new warning alarm blared inside the pod. Jake snapped his head up. "Now what?" Vesper leaned forward, checking the radar. Her expression hardened. "Incoming ships, multiple." Jake's gut tightened. "Zara's people." Vesper shook her head. "No. Worse." The stars outside twisted as 3 massive black vessels appeared from the void, angular, jagged, moving like shadows given form. Jake felt an unseen pressure against his skull. A presence. A will. Then a voice. Not through the radio, but inside his mind. "Welcome, Carter. We have been waiting." Jake's breath caught. The architects. Vesper cursed under her breath. "They found us." The lead ship extended a long, claw-like docking bridge toward the escape pod, pulling them in with invisible force. Jake fought the instinct to resist, to fight, to run. But something about the way the ships moved, the way their presence pressed down on him. They weren't just captors. They were watching, testing. And then, just before the darkness swallowed them, Jake understood something. The Celestial Empress wasn't a game. It was a recruitment test, and he had just passed. The unknown awaits. As the escape pod was pulled into the unknown ship, Vesper looked at him, her green eyes sharp despite her wound. "We're not getting out of this one, are we?" Jake inhaled, forcing a grin. "Not yet." Vesper smirked. "Good. I hate easy exits." The pod doors hissed open, revealing a corridor of impossible darkness. Shapes moved in the shadows, waiting, watching. And then, Jake and Vesper stepped forward, into the unknown, into Project Ascension.